Somebody once told everybody on the internet that Casio is god tier and we should never question that.
Casio is god tier, will always be god tier.
I don't think they are. I think Casio is a great brand. They've got some fantastic watches, but they've also got some good watches and some pretty mediocre watches. It's been a while since I've had a Casio in my collection. I've been looking for something with the retro Casio vibes that might be a little bit longer lasting, so I picked up this A1000 Rag Bone. Let's take a look. Let's get straight into some specifications with this one. Particular highlights: the thickness here, 7.8mm, super thin, one of the benefits of a digital watch typically. The sapphire crystal, very much a highlight for me with a Casio digital. RRP is $260 US. I didn't pay this, it was quite heavily discounted on Casio's Canadian website. And water resistant only is perhaps the biggest drawback, I think, for something at this price point. Let's move forward with a closer look at the finishing on the watch. In the hand, you can see, by the way, it plays really nicely with the light, with this really interesting finish applied to the stainless steel. It's like a sort of matte grey metallic finishing. Features on the 3479 module: you've got the alarm, you've got a stopwatch, and then you've got the changing time and date mode, and that's it. It's a pretty simple module. The benefit of such thing is you don't need to read the manual, you just tap some buttons and it's pretty easy to figure out. Looking a little bit closer at the display and the surround, there's some really nice detailing here. So obviously you've got these steps around the screen and also leading up to the edge where the sapphire crystal is mounted. And then in the lower portion you've got this really nice texturing, and of course the typical labeling Casio at the top. You've got Rag Bone at the bottom, as is the special collaboration, and then you've got your typical functions labeled with mode, light, and then start stop. The colorway on this means that they're quite visible as text, but they blend in really nicely and they don't stick out too much. So in terms of the colors used here and the finishing, I think everything fits together really nicely, and there's been some real effort made with the design and color choice. I want to touch briefly on the display itself, because this is of course a negative display, and for me personally, I love the negative displays when it comes to digital watches. The positive displays for me just remind me of calculators that I used at school as a kid and makes me think of being back in a hall taking a maths exam. If you don't like them, then this one's definitely not going to change your mind. The flaws are still there. I have found with this one, when you get the right angle, it's pretty clear and easy to read, but it's not always easy to find the right angle, and obviously in a dark room or even in low light you need to use the backlight a lot. I remember the Casio backlights of old where it was just a very dim LED. This one, it's a lot better. You can still see the LED from the one side, but it lights up and illuminates the whole display really nicely, and it's offers fantastic nighttime legibility. And link fit is actually pretty good on this. There's only a small amount of play, it's equal on both sides. There's quick release on the bracelet. Overall quality on the bracelet is really nice. There's a little tiny bit of flex, just enough to keep it comfortable but not too much, and really nice quality on it. So I wouldn't expect when you buy this, because of how it looks, that you'll be using the quick release too much. Case back is nothing fancy at all on this. Typical Casio affair, 4 screws, brushed steel, and a list of specifications. Only difference on this one being the special edition is the details of Rag Bone and their logo on there. Other than that, pretty much everything that you expect to see. This watch looks great on the wrist, outdoors and indoors. That thin case and that lightweight, and also the short links on the bracelet, means it conforms really nicely, and it doesn't become too tiresome wearing this for long periods of time, but it isn't perfect. Let's move on to some of the negatives. Why do I have to hold the button for the light down continually? It's so fiddly and so difficult to push, especially with large fingers. Why can it not just stay on for 5 seconds when I tap it? The bracelet pulls my arm hairs. Not all the time, but some of the time is too much for the price of this. Maybe it's just me, but I find this module strange. Normally start stop on a stopwatch is at the top right, but weirdly on this one it's at the bottom right to start it, and then the light resets it. It seems a bit unusual. The buttons are relatively mushy, there's no tactile feeling, there's no positive clicks. It's a standard Casio affair, and again, I come back to the price point on this. If the watch was $30, I'll say fair play, but it isn't. Come on, Casio. Milled clasps are not that expensive, and digital watches are relatively cheap to construct versus automatics. So at $260 I think Casio can do better. Quoted accuracy is only plus or minus 30 seconds per month. The waterproofing sucks. Casio described this as water resistant, which their definition is wearable while water is being splashed, but not under any pressure. No shower, no swimming pool, rain or tap only. It's not all doom and gloom though, and just to go over some of the highlights and the reasons why I really like this watch. I've mentioned the thickness. I really enjoy just how thin it is. The lightweight, I love the design. I think this looks awesome, and this is why I was happy to spend the money for this edition. Like I said, the backlight is much better than they used to be. I like the fact it has an alarm and stopwatch. I think these are two extremely useful features. It's got 3-year battery life, which is decent enough, and the quick release on the bracelet is a nice addition.
Yes or no, this is your last chance, no beating around the bush.
So the last Casio that I had was an A168 reissue, which was a relatively cheap watch, but I think it put me off a little bit because once I'd worn it, scratched it up, it essentially became disposable, and this is what puts me off the super cheap Casios. I think Casio is a great brand, but Casio make a hell of a lot of watches. There's a lot of average watches and mediocrity in their catalogue. I think they're a bit like Citizen. I think they have some really great watches, some particular highlights, but not everything they do is fantastic. So for me, they're not god tier, they're great tier. I seem to be perhaps in the minority with this opinion. This watch does scratch the itch for me. Specifically, I wanted something that was going to be long lasting and had features like a sapphire crystal and full stainless steel, rather than just being plated or having a resin band or a mineral crystal, or even worse, just a piece of plastic covering the display. So this is going to be the digital watch in my collection for a little while to come at least. I do think Timex also have some good offerings and don't get talked about nearly as much as they probably should. They do have a good range of full stainless steel digital watches. And I do think it's interesting to see the emergence of some of the AliExpress brands also making full stainless steel digital watches as well for a significantly lower price than the Casios. Hopefully you found the video somewhat interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular watch, on Casio as a brand, and I'm sure many of you are going to tell me that I'm absolutely wrong about my slight reservations with Casio, but please do leave comments. I always try and reply as much as I can, and I do love a good conversation with fellow watch enthusiasts. So thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.